Ahead on WRAL Triangle and Two, is it time to panic? The Canes drop game 3 to the Devils. We'll break it down. And also, we'll discuss the Panthers' biggest offseason move that no one is talking about. Welcome into WRAL Triangle and Two. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined as always by Luis Fernandez. Luis, we got to start, though. Quarterback Panthers, and a report coming out last week that there's going to be some sort of competition, that Andy Dalton's back to QB1, something no one wants to hear about. But this report, Pro Football Talk, Andy Dalton, Bryce Young, not even into rookie camp, training camp, anything. And we're already talking about this here.
Well, I mean, right. I don't really didn't expect anything too different. You know what I mean? It's NFL coaches, football coaches in general are about like competition and finding the best person. And even if they invest the first round pick, they're going to want to say, okay, we're having competition here. I'm sure when they brought Andy Dalton in, it was a 2-year deal. I'm sure they weren't like, hey man, you're going to be the backup to whoever we pick at number 1. And Andy's a competitive guy. I'm sure he wants to come in and do well. But it just, when you pick someone number 1 overall, you're going to turn the keys over to him eventually, right? Like, am I wrong in saying that?
And honestly, if we were talking about Andy Dalton, the Pro Bowl quarterback, that would be one thing. Earlier in his career, now into the twilight of his career, Luis, I see this, and it likens me back to several years ago when the Chicago Bears did the same thing with Andy Dalton, saying, hey, he's QB1 ahead of drafting Justin Fields, and that was a whole fiasco. This past season, Andy Dalton as a quarterback for the Saints, like, I genuinely believe this, Luis. I don't know why Jameis Winston didn't get the opportunity to play there. And I honestly think that Allen had dirt on Jameis Winston because Andy Dalton is what he is at this point in his career. He used to be a Pro Bowl quarterback, a quarterback who could take your team to the playoffs. At this point, at this moment in time in his career, if you're a good young rookie quarterback worth his salt, which the Panthers hope Bryce Young is, I think it should be Bryce Young come week 1, but you don't want to put too much too fast, too soon on the young quarterback out of Alabama.
Okay, I mean, that's fair in some ways, but I'm also an Andy Dalton truther. In a lot of ways, he's the red rifle. Here's my thing, right? I understand that Andy Dalton is not the Andy Dalton of old, back when like there were actual conversations around, okay, is Andy Dalton like a top 10 kind of guy? He's a Pro Bowler, all that kind of stuff. We live in a different world now. But Andy Dalton is also not bad. Andy Dalton is very Andy Dalton, like that. He is here. Like, this is Andy Dalton. If your quarterback is better than Andy Dalton, you got your guy. If your quarterback's worse than Andy Dalton, you need to get a guy. And then you got Andy Dalton. And, like, I mean, last year, I know, I mean, it's stats and there's a lot more to it. But, like, last year, he completed 66% of his passes, 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Like, what Andy Dalton does is he has a lot of high-profile mistakes. Like, he'll be, when no one is watching, when it's 1 p.m. and he's just doing his thing, and he does pretty well. And then he will make a mistake or two in the most high-profile of moments. Playoffs, you don't have to tell me twice about Andy Dalton in the playoffs. Last year, I think it was they were playing, I forget who was the Saints were playing, but it's like he throws the pick 6. He's like rolling his eyes, walking off the field, and you see, I think it was maybe the Cardinals or someone like Budda Baker or someone is like jumping, diving over into the end zone through the pylon. Like, that's, Andy Dalton makes mistakes like that. But like what I'm saying is, like, Bryce Young is going to have to earn the number 1 quarterback spot. I think he should be the number 1 quarterback, but he's going to have to earn it. And when you compare quarterbacks coming into a position where they have a backup or a number 2 guy who's going to compete with them, when they were number 1 picks, I feel like this is more competitive than it would be in like other situations. Like, it's not like, Jared Goff coming in and Case Keenum's the starter in LA back in 2016. Like, it's Andy's going to put up a bit of a fight. I think Bryce Young should get it, but Andy's going to put up a bit of a fight.
I think we're on the same page and what I would call a verbal agreement here, Luis. And here's what I mean by this, though. Here's how I know Bryce Young should be the week 1 starter. And again, yes, you have to earn your keep. A team in your own division says, bye, we'll let you test the free agent. We'll let you leave, and not just leave, we'll let you go to another team in the same division in the NFC South. It tells me everything I need to know where Andy Dalton is at this point in his career. It's not to take away with what he's accomplished in his career, Lewis, but he's 35 years old. So he's not the same spring chicken that he was early on in his career. And I'll say this, if Bryce Young isn't the week 1 starter, I had different feelings based on which quarterback the Panthers would take. But I don't think there was any doubt that the 2 top guys were Young and Stroud in terms of being most pro ready. It should be Bryce Young come week 1, and you do hope Andy Dalton puts up a fight. But if a team in your own division lets you go to another team in the division, tells me everything I need to know right there, Lewis.
Well, I think also too, like part of the reason why the Saints did that was they wanted to get a guy who's going to be there for the next 5-10 years in Derek Carr. But I will use this as an example here. Okay. I went back and I looked at all the times a quarterback has been drafted number 1 overall since 2000. Okay. It's happened 16 times because I think this is part of it. It's the draft capital that you invest into someone. That's a direct notion of how important they need to be to your team, what kind of resources you're going to give them, all that kind of stuff. So there have been 16 quarterbacks taken with the number 1 overall pick since 2000. 10 of them have started game 1, week 1. And you go back, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Jameis Winston, Andrew Luck, Cam Newton, Sam Bradford, Matthew Stafford, like a lot of those names that you know. So I'm not over here saying, hey, Dalton's a better quarterback. But what I am saying is like, it's not like Bryce Young's coming in and competing against a bum. He's not going to be the presumed starter. A coach is always going to pick like who they think is going to help them win games early on. There were 6 instances of a quarterback being picked number 1 and not starting immediately. It hasn't happened since 2018, actually. Baker Mayfield, he only had 13 starts. Because I think it was week 3, he comes in at like halftime against the Jets on like Thursday Night Football and gets the Browns their first win and whatever it was, something along those lines.
Hugh Jackson era, Lewis.
Yeah, Hugh Jackson. Don't get me started on Hugh Jackson. Jared Goff. He only had 7 starts, but that was also like Jeff Fisher was coaching him at the time. And Jeff Fisher, great coach historically, but is also or a good coach historically.
Thank you.
8-8 classic. 8-8, 7-9, whatever it is that Jeff Fisher always finishes at. But he was also more of an old school guy who was more likely going to start or sit a young guy. I think part of it too is, so you have to look at if a quarterback's going to start number 1 or week 1, if they're pick number 1, you have to look at what the quarterback room is and what the situation is. It's not like Bryce Young is coming into the worst team in the NFL. The Panthers traded up to get this pick. So I think that also plays into it. You're not going to be putting him in a position where he's going to get hurt immediately. Joe Burrow starts his first 10 games and then tears his ACL because that offensive line was putrid. You look at some of these where it's I'm trying to think back here. Jamarcus Russell doesn't start essentially his entire first year for various reasons there. Baker Mayfield, that team was that the team the year before that went winless? Was that right for the Browns? So, they don't throw him into the mix.
Hugh Jackson is historically one of the worst coaches in league history if you go purely based on record. So it's just
if you care about if the team wins or loses.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that Andy Dalton is going to come out here and have comeback player of the year and stun everyone, as the starter for the Panthers while Bryce Young sits out a year. But what I am saying is that Andy Dalton is a step above, I think, the normal competitors that a quarterback room has for a number 1 overall pick, which is good because in the best case scenario, Bryce Young's your guy and then Andy Dalton's your backup. And then you have a very good backup situation.
I'm with you there. I have one other request, Lewis. Can we get the Panthers to produce an Andy Dalton QB1 social media graphic and set the internet on fire?
That's they announce Frank Reich announces at the beginning of training camp that Andy's the guy until Bryce wins it over, and it's geez, no, thank you.
I don't think there's any upside for whether it's Frank Reich, whether it's Scott Fitterer, whether it's Tepper to say who the starting quarterback is week 1. I don't think there's any upside there for them. So it's I would not answer that question if I was asked that question by a reporter, if I was in any 3 of their shoes.
I think the only way, unless like Bryce gets hurt in training camp or preseason or something like that. I think the only way Bryce Young is not starting is if the schedule gets released, which we still don't know, by the way.
Thursday.
It may not be released. It's apparently it might be a little bit up in the air. Reports are going into that. But I think the only way he doesn't really start week 1 is if the schedule is released and the Panthers' week 1 opponent is like some absolutely monstrous defense that might get Bryce Young hurt. And then you start Andy as a sacrificial lamb. And then you let the Bryce Young pick up after that. That would be the only situation I really see.
For the record, we're not wishing injury upon anybody.
No,
I hear what you're saying, though. I hear what you're saying, though, in terms of how the schedule comes out. Possibly Thursday might get bumped back. We'll see. We're going to keep an eye on that as well. Lewis, let's keep this rolling, though. And I told you before the start of the show today, so you have no clue which direction I'm going to go with this.
No.
The best offseason move that the Panthers have made beyond drafting Bryce Young, the number one overall quarterback, is this. The Panthers picking up the 5th-year option for Derrick Brown. Reason being, you pair him with Brian Burns, who they could have traded for 2 first-round picks last season. It all starts up front. It's a line of scrimmage game. So you're getting a player this upcoming season in Brown for $11.6 million. If he plays at a Pro Bowl level, that's going to be a bargain. If you could lock him up for the next several years at, $15 million or so, and if he continues to progress and play at a Pro Bowl caliber level, I really think that this is a move which the Panthers made a week ago that no one's talking about, that I think will be significant, not just for this upcoming season, but for the next several years. They pick up the 5th-year option. If you can work out a long-term deal with both Brown and Burns up front 7, you've got 2 studs controlling the line of scrimmage. And really it starts with the interior. And that's why I think no one's talking about this with Derrick Brown. Very, very important to pick up his 5th-year option. I'd like to see them work out a long-term deal here in the coming years as well, too, Lewis. What say you? What do you think about my take?
What do you think the chances of him playing at a Pro Bowl level are, like, honestly?
I mean, look at each year, his production has gotten better and better and better and better. And he posted career highs. And it's like, I'd have to look. I believe it's either tackles or tackles for loss where he ties a franchise record from the 2022 season. So the production and the statistical output is there. But especially in the division, look at the teams in the division. There's not a ton of quarterback talent. And if that's the case, okay, we've got to stop the run then. We need some dogs in the front 7. I think it's high because of the division that you play in, and there's going to be more premium on stopping the run as well. And with Burns as well off the edge. If you had 2 first-round picks, that tells me a ton about what his value is and what other teams think of them as well. That's really important, Lewis. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this, but you have potential 2 cornerstones defensively. If you can get them under contract beyond this upcoming season, have those 2 guys in the front 7. And it's going to make, here's the thing too, on the back end of your defense, it's going to make the DB's jobs heck of a lot easier if you know an opposing quarterback doesn't have that much time to throw.
My main concern would be like the transition to the 3-4, right? Because you're going to be asking a lot more of your 3 down linemen there. They're going to kind of be having to be playing different gaps, be playing just different kind of situations in general. So that would be my main concern. But sure, I personally, because like you said, I did not know where you were going to go with this, so I picked what I perceived to be the most underrated movement in the offseason for the Panthers. Would you like
lay it on me, Lewis? Lay it on me.
So I'm gonna go with Vonn Bell signing safety.
Okay.
From Cincinnati, or played in Cincinnati previously.
You love the Bengals.
I do.
You love the Bengals.
No. Let me tell you why. I didn't pick Hayden Hurst. Okay, I did not pick Hayden Hurst for a reason. As I knocked my headphone out of my ear because I'm getting so excited thinking about the Cincinnati Bengals. But here's why I think Vonn Bell. Okay. So what he allows to do is he takes he allows the other defensive backs to essentially be able to do more, to focus a little bit less on that coverage in the back end of things because he's so consistent. He started every single game in Cincinnati. I think he only missed a couple of games with the Saints. Remember, he did play for the Saints, so he has some familiarity with the NFC South. And he essentially he's someone who is able to almost serve as like a game manager, a calming presence back on the back end of things. I think that will go a long way for their defense. I'm more so like this year and next year. I do worry because Vonn Bell is going to be, turning 30 here shortly. He's going to be a little bit older, especially at the tail end of this contract. But I think early on, if the Panthers want to make moves and continue to get better, Vonn Bell was a major player in Cincinnati's rise to prominence. And so I don't think that is not a coincidence. And I think it's part of the reason why you can go and get a guy like that. Jeremy Chin, I think, is going to be someone who's probably going to have a much better year next year because he's going to be able to play a little bit closer to line of scrimmage, allow himself to do a little more playmaking. Jesse Bates over in Cincinnati as a safety, now in Atlanta in the division, is someone who was able, I think, to kind of do a lot more because you knew what you had on the other side of the field. Plus, Vonn Bell is just all around a very strong safety overall, both stopping the run and playing in pass coverage. In his 3 years in Cincinnati, his PFF run stopping and pass coverage grade was 60 or better. So he's someone who I think is going to be a nice kind of plug and play guy, set it, forget it type thing for the Panthers. Underrated signing, in my opinion.
You mentioned Vonn Bell and Jesse Bates. I think they're going to benefit from playing in the NFC this upcoming season because in the AFC, who are the other stud safeties? You got Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then you've got Derwin James with the Chargers, Fitzpatrick with the Steelers. So they could be overshadowed by other elite level players in their own conference, and they're going to get the opportunity to do their thing here in the NFC this upcoming season. You mentioned Bell, a player who by and large has stayed healthy. This past year was the first time he didn't play in double-digit regular season games. He had done that every other season to this point in his career. And then it's the same thing with Derrick Brown, Lewis, because I looked through the first 3 seasons of his career, and he's missed 1 game in the NFL in his first. So it tells me everything I need to know. Old slogan, the best ability is availability. Both players have demonstrated the ability to do that consistently throughout the duration of their careers. So this Panthers defense, I'm telling you, Lewis, we're going to be obsessed with the quarterback play. It's probably what we're going to lead a lot of shows with. It's what we led today with, but don't discount that defense either. And I think the addition of Bell and then Derrick Brown and the Hosses up front and just getting after quarterbacks and opposing running backs in the backfield, living behind the line of scrimmage, Lewis. That's where I want to see all of those players for the Panthers this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think the way I would put it is I think the offense for the Panthers will determine the ceiling for this season. The defense for the Panthers will determine the floor because they're going to be, their way the roster is currently built, it just screams to me a team that is going to lean on the run, that is going to try and limit mistakes, that's going to try and just play good defense. And I can go a long way, especially in a division that is not very good in the NFC South.
All right, Lewis, let's go to the ice. Final topic of the show here on WRAL Triangle and Two. Canes lose game 3 to the Devils 8-4. Canes still lead the series 2-1. Here's my hope. I hope that the Devils got all the goals that they're going to score in one game, and law of averages says, hey, you got 8 in one game, you'll get either 0 or 1 for the rest of the games in the series. But time to panic. What was your reaction after game 3, Lewis?
It felt to me like the Devils just got out all their frustration from how things went at PNC in game 1 and 2. Because no, I mean, like, that's what's so weird about 7-game series, right? Is everything changes from one game to another completely. After 2 games at PNC, I was like, man, the Hurricanes aren't going to lose anyone ever again. Like, look at them go. But and the Devils make some responses. They continue to play fast. Jack Hughes was going to get his. He had 2 goals and 2 assists. I think he had like 90 some odd points in the regular season. He was going to get his eventually. And then you have the 2 guys they got at the trade deadline, Timo Meyer and Nico. Hockey names are. I write this down just to make sure.
You have mercy
Nico
on
Hischier.
us.
No, Nico Hischier. You have like they were going to start making plays eventually. What really I think kind of threw off any possibility of the Canes stealing one in game 3 was Antti Raanta not being available. He had an illness. Because it was right about time for him to kind of come in there. I think after Freddie Anderson had started game 1, game 2, and game 6 against the Islanders, it was right about time to give him a little bit of a reprieve. So, I mean, I think that was kind of, that was a big part of it. The writing was on the wall a little bit earlier. I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, it's a 7-game series. The series doesn't start until the away team wins a game on the road or whatever it might be. No, I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. But I think the Canes will be able to adjust. Assuming Antti Raanta, he recovers from the illness that he's dealing with. I think they'll be okay. But it's try not to overreact, because they were absolutely dominant in game 1 and game 2 so far this year, or so far this series. So I don't know. It was very like you're keeping track of the goals. And you're like, geez, what is going on? But
yeah,
the Devils were going to get theirs, is how I would phrase it.
Yeah, it's the Hughes brothers too, because Jack Hughes and then the rookie Luke Hughes slow both of those guys down, and then the near fight that Jack Hughes had with Sebastian Aho too, where it's just like, you mentioned the bad blood. That's the first thing that came to mind, Lewis.
Frustration. Like, I mean, yeah. I'm sure everyone with the Devils was incredibly frustrated because the Hurricanes just took it to them for game 1 and game 2. There was really no opportunity, no option for them. It felt like the Canes were just dominant. And so, it was a classic game 3 where the road team just comes in and just unloads all the frustration that they have. I don't know. We'll see. One thing I will say that I do think is going to be important is because, as bad as it is that the Canes gave up 8 goals. You kind of had you saw why that was happening, understanding everything that was going on with Raanta, Freddie Anderson having so many starts in a row now. That kind of, you kind of understand it to an extent. To me, though, the fact that I think the Canes still have the advantage over Akira Schmid and Vitek Vanacek for the Devils, just because Vanacek struggled in the Rangers series, right? He gave up, I think his save percentage was like mid 80s in game 1 and game 2. Like the reason why they went to Akira Schmid was because of how poorly he was playing in game 1 and game 2. It's not like he came in here, he finally got the start again, but it's not like he came in here and, just absolutely succeeded and shut them out and stood on his head and all that kind of stuff. No, he gave up 4 goals. His save percentage was still like less than 90. Like, I think that they're still a little bit in the head of the Devils goaltenders. Especially with how they played Akira in the first 2 games. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's definitely disheartening, but I would not press the panic button yet. You start pressing if it's 2-2, and then it's a best of 3 series, then these teams are as close as we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the series. That's how I would phrase it.
Game 4 is Tuesday night, Lewis. Any keys that you're looking at heading into game 4 for how the Canes can come out victorious and take a 3-1 series lead?
Just continue being the physical team that they've been. They're going to have to figure out the whole situation with Freddie and Raanta.
That's where my brain is, Lewis, because they still played 2 goalies in game 3. In Anderson, and then I had the pronunciation down before the show, and now I've lost it, Lewis. But anyways, Canes play 2 goalies in game 3 and give up 8 goals. You shore that up, and like I said, I'm gonna say law of averages, where it's just like maybe the Devils get one, maybe two come game 4. That is my hope.
When you looked at all of the second round series, Canes Devils was the closest one per like all the different sports books and things like that. So I just because of how well the Canes played in game 1 and game 2, I think the notion was, nope, the Canes are actually going to run away with this. This is going to be great. But the Devils responded to game 3 like they're supposed to do. Like if you were a playoff team, you are good, and it's just about making the small adjustments in order to take advantage in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think that these teams are going to be we're going to see closer games than I think we've seen in these first 3. It's both teams are just kind of doing their thing, and I think game 4, game 5, however many games there ends up being, are going to be closer contests. So yeah, Canes just got to keep on attacking is how I would phrase it, because the way they handled game 1 and game 2, it just absolutely dominated them. So they can do it, but the Devils. The question to me was, were the Devils going to come in game 3 and just lay down and the Canes take the 3-0 lead, and they didn't. And so, all right, congrats. Now you have a dogfight, and you got to do your best to, try and steal a game on the road. But that's why you play at PNC, is because it's one of the best, if not the best, places to play. Especially when it comes to postseason hockey. So just got to try and steal one in New Jersey. That's going to be the key.
We'll see if the Canes can TCB, and that's taking care of business. Lewis, you're the absolute best. I want to thank you. I want to thank Capital Broadcasting Company. And this has been another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. Any final thoughts before we sign off here, my man?
Nah, man. Don't disrespect Andy Dalton. Don't disrespect Andy Dalton. That's the final thought. Don't disrespect Andy Dalton.
For Luis Fernandez, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for watching and listening to WRAL Triangle and Two. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and so long, everybody.